Welcome to Beat Everyone. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com. So Alabama plays Georgia on Saturday, 6:45 p.m. Central Time in Athens, Sanford Stadium, between the hedges. Alabama hasn't played there since they whipped Georgia in the rain in 2015. This is the biggest game on Alabama's schedule in 2025. We all had it circled during the offseason, and there are a lot of big storylines to cover here. Alabama is now going to have a new permanent annual rival, removing one of the greatest annual matchups in college football history. We'll get to that a little bit later, but helping me sort through all this is Beat Everyone producer Matt Scalisi. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, Ben. Been a while since I've been in front of the camera on one of these, but it's been an interesting season already.
Yeah, you're always lurking, no matter what.
That's right.
You can pop in whenever you want to, interrupt us if you have to. But yeah, so Matt, I mean, Alabama, Georgia, it's become the college football rivalry, at least during the final stretch of the Saban years, I would say. And Kalen DeBoer got in on the fun last year, obviously beating Georgia in his first meeting against Kirby Smart in Bryant-Denny Stadium. It was an instant classic. A lot of people still consider that the game of the year in 2024 for obvious reasons. It was the emergence of Ryan Williams as this new phenom, I should say, in college football. And then Georgia comes back in the second half after Alabama opens up an early lead. And then it's just a slugfest from that point on. But Georgia made the playoff. Alabama didn't. In the offseason, everybody kind of declared these two teams as potential, if not probable, college football playoff teams in the newly expanded 12-team playoff. But Alabama, obviously, the rocky start against Florida State. Georgia is undefeated. They're coming off of a really tough win in Knoxville, shootout against Josh Heupel's Tennessee team. So they've both had bye weeks, and here we are, finally, this showdown that everybody's been waiting for in the first part of the season, which is really a thrill for fans because it's been a boring slog up to this point. So we finally get real SEC action here, at least from Alabama's standpoint. So Matt, I mean, there are a million different directions we can go here, but early thoughts, like what do you think the fan temperature is with the Georgia game? Going into the season, it seemed like they circled this one or kind of X'd it out as a game that they kind of expected Alabama to lose. It's on the road. Kalen DeBoer's teams don't play well on the road, and they thought Alabama can lose this game and still have a playoff resume. If this is one of the losses, this will be a good loss. But Alabama lost their first game, and now this becomes less affordable. Matt, how do you think fans are feeling about this, good or bad?
You know, I do think in a weird way, everything that you just mentioned, the full picture of it, actually does take a little bit of the pressure off Alabama going into this game. I think that obviously multiple losses puts you in a situation where you have zero margin of error from that point forward, and you still might not get in to the playoff if that's the case. But Florida State, by all accounts so far, appears to be a team that it will not be embarrassing for Alabama to have a road loss against. And Georgia, look, as you said, I think a lot of people going into this season kind of chalked this one up as a likely loss for Alabama on the road against Georgia. The issue with that now becomes Alabama maybe is playing a little bit better. They've figured a few things out. They might also be getting some key players back from injury coming into this game. And Georgia has just put a lot of stuff on film in the meantime in a shootout against Tennessee where you're not able to be very conservative. You've got to do everything you can do. You've got to show your strengths and weaknesses in a game like that. And I think there is, of course, also the looming element of this. I don't know what you want to call it. I don't know if you want to call it being snake bit or cursed or whatever it is. But Georgia fans and Kirby Smart have a history that they are all extremely aware of when it comes to playing Alabama. It is a sore spot on Kirby's resume in the same way that Auburn was for Nick Saban, I think, through his tenure. And that raises the pressure on a game like this. The fact that it's at home raises the pressure. Is there more excitement for Georgia because it's at home? Sure. But it also means the fear of losing a game like this, the potential embarrassment of losing a game like this makes this a very high stakes situation for Georgia and Kirby Smart in the way that it isn't for Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, if Alabama wins this game, and we're going to go through like a few different scenarios and sort of like alternative timelines that we could be seeing here, and there are a lot of really fascinating ones. But if Alabama wins, let's focus less on the Alabama part of it, but very briefly on the Kirby Smart of it, right? Like he just can't beat Alabama. And you don't really know why. And they'll always have the Indianapolis 2021 national championship.
Yeah.
They beat Alabama on the biggest possible stage, and that was huge. And they seem to like figure it out and eradicate the problem. But it was one win in the Saban era, and he hasn't beaten Kalen DeBoer yet. And if he can't beat Kalen DeBoer in year two, and Kalen DeBoer already struggled out of the gate, then it just seems like Kirby Smart has an Alabama problem.
I mean, they've lost to Alabama twice since that national championship game. I think that national championship is more the exception than the rule. I
Yeah.
don't know that it got his fan base off his back about this Alabama problem that he has. And look, a lot of things like this can get blown up. They're often to do more with coincidence than a real sort of material disadvantage of some kind. I think timing has had something to do with it, but I do think there is likely some real phenomenon happening psychologically within Georgia that they don't treat this game the same way they treat other games. It means something to them. There, I hesitate to say it. I wonder if there's a bit of a big brother complex happening for Georgia and Alabama in this game. That I mean, there's an insecurity to it, right? Because Georgia, as a program, likes to think of themselves as world class. There's nobody better than us. We have the best of everything that you could ever want, except for Alabama. We can't really stand toe to toe with Alabama in terms of their accomplishments over pretty much any period of time other than that stretch where Georgia was unbeatable for a couple of years. And even when they were unbeatable those couple of years, they lost to Alabama during that stretch. So I think that at a certain point, whether it's real or not, whether there's a real X's and O's advantage of some kind, becomes kind of irrelevant because if it's having an impact on everybody inside the program in some way, psychological is real. And I think we've seen it in the past. So again, Iron Bowl is great. I think example to point to here because I think we all can understand and agree there's something about that game, especially when it's in Auburn, that gets in the heads of Alabama players in some way. And they play differently in that game than they play in other games. I think some of this happens with Georgia, but a lot of it does depend on the start of the game. How do you come out of the gate in a game like this? And how do you affect the other team psychologically by doing that? Last year, Alabama hit this team out of the gate super hard. That they had everything working for them on both sides of the ball to start that game. And I think if you could do something, obviously you'd love to get up 28-0 anytime, but to come out and punch Georgia in the mouth at the start of a game like that on the road, I think it would have a real impact on everybody in that building.
Yeah, there's no indication that that will happen with Alabama, right? Other
Sure.
than they look, I think we're critical of DeBoer's teams on the road for good reason because they laid eggs in Nashville, Knoxville, Norman, and then obviously away from Tuscaloosa in the bowl game against Michigan. But on the
And
other hand,
Tallahassee.
and now Tallahassee. But on the other hand, last year they stomped Wisconsin, and we all know that Wisconsin is just not on the level of Alabama or another SEC team that they would have to play on the road. And they stomped LSU, a good LSU team last year. And so there were periods where they looked good on the road and they were able to start fast, but more often than not, they don't. And so I think that Alabama fans are right to feel anxious about this game, and they were right to feel like this could be one that is unwinnable. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's just not one that they expect to win going into the 2025 season. That's logical for Alabama fans to feel that way. But does that mean that it won't or can't happen? Absolutely not, because we just don't know what team we're going to get from Kalen DeBoer when they go on the road. And this Georgia team in particular, Matt, very beatable from what we've seen so
I think
far.
so. I mean,
And I
look,
like,
and I'll also say, I mean, we'll get into it later this week on our second episode this week when we really do a preview of this game. But uh, I, I don't know that Georgia necessarily is built in that specific way to take advantage of the things Alabama's not good at. Right? I mean, the strengths don't necessarily match with Alabama's weaknesses, and vice versa. So it's not. Look, it's hard to ever predict how this program's going to play on the road under Kalen DeBoer so far. I think that there's more to be learned from this game than just the W or L that comes up on Alabama's record after it. And I know this fan base is never going to accept something like a moral victory, but I think regardless of whether they win the game or not, we can learn a lot about where this team is at a month into the season. Are they completely incapable of competing with the best teams on their schedule, particularly on the road, or was that season opener a blip on the radar of this team? And is this ultimately a competitive team that's going to put up a fight at least against the best teams on their schedule?
yeah, and think through the scenarios now, Matt. I mean, if Alabama wins this game, right, what happens? It turns out that Alabama is a contender
I
nationally.
think
It,
so.
it turns out that Florida State is a contender nationally. And now that loss does not look nearly as bad as it did as soon as Alabama lost it. It's another huge statement, signature win for Kalen DeBoer, especially if they're able to go on the road and beat arguably the best, not only coach, but program in college football right now. I think that Georgia has since overtaken Alabama when it comes to that title to some degree. I mean, they won 2 national championships in a row. They've made the playoff again since they won those 2 national championships. In terms of consistency in the coach that they have, I think Georgia at least has an argument for best program in the country right now, at least when it just comes to pure sustained success. But it would be huge. They would have one loss, and the win over Georgia would be one of the best wins. And we don't know how good Georgia is either. If Alabama beats Georgia, maybe it turns out they're not as much of a contender as everybody thought. It's still so early. We're in the first quarter of the
Yeah.
season or whatever it is. We
And
really don't know much about Georgia or Alabama, and this
and
game is
look,
going to tell us a lot.
ultimately, that loss to Florida State, even though it's going to impact the way voters perceive Alabama and the playoff committee, it's a non-conference game. It does not matter in terms of the race to win an SEC championship that automatically gets you into the playoff. So as hard as it is for Alabama fans to get their heads around this, in the record column that actually matters, they are 0-0 right now. They are not in a position of disadvantage in the race for the SEC championship. If you can, I mean, look, this could be a totally different conversation a week from now, but you have to let go of the perception of the Florida State game if you're going to make a serious run at trying to do something special this season, because it's not going to prevent Alabama from getting to that SEC title game. And I think ultimately, if you're in that game, the question of whether you're in the playoff or not is not a question anymore. You're in.
I mean, that was the case last year for Alabama. Had they beaten Oklahoma, had they
Yeah,
beaten Auburn, they're in the SEC championship game. They're probably in the playoff, right? Like that was the whole
no
storyline.
question.
So let's run through a couple more scenarios here, Matt. So, like, this is, and we're just talking here, people. We're just talking. So, if Alabama loses this game, because again, most of us and we, Matt, when we were going game by game and picking the schedule, we picked this as a loss for
Yeah.
Alabama, right? And so, I think most Alabama fans felt this way. I don't mean to speak for the entire fan base, but look, let's be real. But if Alabama loses this game, this could go a couple of different directions. Let's go the happy way first. So if Alabama loses, they've got 2 losses during the first half of the season. Not great, certainly not what anybody expected, and there is no margin for error anymore. They have to win every game for the rest of the season if they want to make the playoff. Would you agree with that?
Probably.
Yes.
You can Yeah, I mean, I think it would be unlikely for a team with 2 losses to make it to the SEC championship game, but it's not impossible.
Not impossible, but
2 SEC losses, I mean. Yeah,
right. Well, last year they had 3 losses and they didn't make the college football
right.
playoff, right? They were knocking on the door, but they didn't. And their losses mattered because they lost to unranked teams. They lost
Yes.
to Vandy, they lost to Oklahoma, and this might be different this year. So they can do it. And maybe we're just being too optimistic here. But Alabama could still finish the season 10-2 because they've got a tough schedule. They played 2 great teams. They happen to lose to them, but they're whipping everybody else. And Alabama finishes 10-2. They still make the playoff. That's a pretty happy scenario, right? Even if they lose this game, it's possible.
I think so, and look, if you're looking down the schedule, Ben, when you talked about that preseason predictions that we did, which of course are always ironclad, but look, the ones that we were most worried about, I think things have flipped around a little bit. I mean, look, Vanderbilt certainly is, as weird as it is to say, they're pretty impressive looking so far. So we'll have to see how that game goes. It's at home. But I mean, look, South Carolina was a big concern for us. South Carolina doesn't look very good anymore. They're 2-2 already at this point. They've had some pretty key injuries, and they've really looked straight up pretty bad against some of their other opponents so far. Missouri is 4-0, but what do we take from that? I mean, I don't know how to feel
Nothing.
about Missouri yet.
Nothing.
Tennessee already has a loss. They certainly look like they have some major defensive deficiencies. Alabama very well could have won against Tennessee last year. It was a very very close loss on the road in Knoxville. I don't think that's an unwinnable game for Alabama, especially in Tuscaloosa. LSU's undefeated. They've played absolutely nobody of consequence. Even more so the case now that it looks like Clemson has really just gone in the tank this year. I think if you look at things right now, Oklahoma is the most imposing game remaining on the schedule after Georgia, and it's in Tuscaloosa. Um, and I think I don't think things look totally dire after this Georgia game. I don't think that running the table, regardless of what happens in Athens, is a total impossibility. And I don't think it's even that unlikely.
Well, Matt, walk with me through the darkest timeline right now. Okay. I don't mean to go doom and gloom right now because I think Alabama fans, they want to remain optimistic going into this game and
Yeah, and
for
they
the
want to
remainder
remain
of the season.
optimistic in something in
Right.
something other than basketball, which I mean, good news for them today on that, but otherwise they still are always going to care more about football.
Bruce Pearl is retiring as we speak, or like the news broke that Bruce Pearl is retiring as we're recording this podcast. So anyway, though, Matt, let's focus again on this dark timeline that I'm talking about. So Alabama loses this game. They're 2-2 going into the Vandy game. Vandy looks good this year.
They
They
do.
don't just look like a different Vandy. They whipped South Carolina in Columbia. They look like a real team. I've heard people say they look better than they did last year when they
They
beat
do.
Alabama, right? So it's not out of the question that Vandy beats Alabama again. Now, Matt, if Alabama loses to Vanderbilt again, and Alabama is 2-3 after 5 games, and they've lost 3 games before halfway through the season, and Kalen DeBoer has lost to Vanderbilt 2 years in a row, that is dark. That
It's
is
dark.
worst case scenario. If that's the case, and we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, but what happens?
I think that uh I think that the phone switchboards, if they still exist, will be very active in certain halls of power in Alabama that whole week leading, following that Vanderbilt game. And I'll tell you, going into a road game against Missouri at that point, the question becomes, can he keep the locker room, right? Does the team continue to buy in, or do you start to visibly lose them? Because we've seen that happen to a lot of teams before. We haven't seen it happen to Alabama in a very long time, but um, teams that have a lot of talent sometimes don't play up to that talent once they've kind of given up hope. And one of the things we know about Alabama players, we've heard it for years. These guys come to Alabama to play for championships. They're not there to go to the Birmingham Biscuit Bowl. They're there to compete at the highest level. And once that's no longer on the table, the question is, can Kalen DeBoer keep the interest and the focus and the buy-in of his locker room? And I think that becomes a very crucial week for him and his tenure at Alabama. I mean, look, this is a very dark possibility to go down, Ben, but that's just what I'm saying. I think if that all plays out, I think that becomes the most important week of his career, leading up to the Missouri game.
I think it would be over after that point, honestly. Like just the way college football operates, who knows? And I'm not trying to speak this into existence, right? Like we want Alabama fans to feel good going into this Georgia game and certainly going into the Vandy game, which is something that we never thought we would think or say in our lifetimes. Because there are reasons to feel hopeful about this game. I mean, what Georgia's favored by what, like 3.5 or 4? I mean,
Yeah,
low.
it's a
It's a
close
low
thing.
spread. I think these teams are going to be evenly matched. Georgia has weaknesses too. They don't run the ball super well, kind of like Alabama. Alabama's still trying to figure out what they're doing with the running back position. We don't know if Jan Miller is going to play in this game. We don't know where Alabama is injury wise with some of the offensive linemen. So we'll see, right? Like there, but Ty Simpson and Kirby Smart said this publicly this week. He said Ty Simpson's the hottest quarterback in the country, is the way he put it. But Ty Simpson looks great, and he's looked great the last 2 games. Alabama has looked great defensively and offensively, and we keep going back to that same mantra. Who did they play, right? Like the competition was not good, totally fair, but you play who's in front of you. You try to play well against whoever is in front of you, and that's what Alabama has done. They've done the bare minimum in terms of beating these teams that are on their schedule and looking good while doing it. But the good news is that they've looked good. And I think that no matter who you play, if you execute well, you gain confidence and you also gain experience. And these reps have been really important for Ty Simpson and really important for these guys to gel, to find chemistry, to develop with each other. And that's something that Alabama fans really need to feel good about because Georgia is coming off a really tough game on the road against Tennessee, where, like you said, you made a great point earlier. They emptied the playbook, man. They had to show not everything, but they had to show a lot of what they had in a really intense, competitive game. And they gave Alabama a lot of film to work with. So Alabama, whether that gives them that much of a strategic advantage, we don't know. But we also know that Kalen DeBoer and Kane Womack and this staff from 2024 played really well against Georgia. They game planned really well against Georgia, and they got out of there with a victory. So I think it bodes well, and I think it's going to be a really competitive game. It just sucks that it's on the road.
For sure. And look, I think this team has played poorly on the road in environments that are not intimidating at all, right? They lost to Vanderbilt on the road last year. They even for Vanderbilt, the stadium was under construction, and I guarantee you that you've been to weddings with more people at them than were at that Vanderbilt, Alabama.
Don't forget
game.
about the Blockbuster Music Award Bowl or whatever it was, and whatever crowd was there
Yeah,
for that. Couldn't have
it's
been that
that.
intimidating.
All of that said, I personally do not put Sanford Stadium, Georgia's home stadium, up there
Oh,
in the top echelon of difficult atmospheres to play in. I think it is. I would compare it to Alabama in the early part of the Saban years, where I don't necessarily think that place was that intimidating to play in early on. I think they have gained that in big games over time, but I don't think Georgia has the craziest home field advantage in the league. It's certainly not going to be one of the 3 toughest places for Alabama to play on their schedule this season.
look back on when they went to Sanford Stadium in 2008, the blackout game. Matt,
Mm-hmm.
where were you that night? Right, like Alabama fans, they all remember where they were for that game, and this was not much removed from the Clemson game, which we've covered on this show. When Alabama reestablished itself as a national contending program, and nobody saw the blackout game coming, and Alabama stomped them, and they were up 31-0 at halftime, and it just looked like a new era. And so that's one that is one that Alabama fans love to relive, revisit. And then you look at 2015, like I said, when Alabama went there and they beat them 38-10. And that like game snapped a streak, I believe, Matt, of when Alabama was a favorite in like literally every game Nick Saban coached for however many years. And going into that game, Alabama was down for the count to some people because they had lost to Ole Miss. And so people thought they had written them off as a team that couldn't compete for a national championship or an SEC championship. And here they come, and they're being thrown to the dogs, so to speak.
Which is wild, by the way.
That was Georgia.
That was on the front end of Alabama playing in the national championship game 4 years in a row.
Exactly. So and then they went and whipped them there. So, I don't think that traditionally Alabama has been intimidated because, I mean, you talk about an intimidating atmosphere. That blackout atmosphere was incredible. They did their job.
Sure.
Georgia fans all did their job. Like, it looked awesome there.
And I think they're going to be
not caring.
I think they're going to be very, very hyped for this game. As much as that place can be, they are sore about last year. Mm-hmm. They're feeling good coming off of that Tennessee win. And honestly, they're in that situation that Alabama fans know well, where you got accustomed to winning national championships, and now it's been a couple of years, and you're hungry again. And I think this is a big opportunity for that program, but it also means you're going to start to get real tight if things aren't going your way at some point.
Matt, like, I don't know how you feel, but how teams play against quote unquote cupcake opponents has always been something that I've paid attention to, especially during the Saban years, because it wasn't always the case that Saban, they would blow teams out. And sometimes they would score in the 60s, like we saw it happen, but they would also struggle against Colorado State. Not struggle in the sense that they might lose the game, but they looked sloppy and they were still shoring things up. They were putting in their backups like halfway through the game. But it would be teams like that. The Citadel, it was like tied at halftime, I think, in 2018 that they were playing the Citadel. But Alabama's beating them, Louisiana Monroe 73-0 now. I remember thinking like, oh, that's what Ohio State does. That's what Oregon does. They run up the score for style points and that kind of a thing. And here Alabama is. You go and look at Georgia's schedule right now. They beat Marshall 45-7 to open the season. And then they played Austin Peay and beat them 28-6. That's what scares me, Matt.
Well, here's the thing. That Austin Peay final score is a little deceiving, I will say, because that game was actually quite close for a long time. It was an ugly game for Georgia, and they played ugly against Austin Peay last year too. So it may just be one of those sort of Georgia Southern type situations for Kirby, where it's just a bad matchup of styles for them, and they just don't play well against a team like that. But this Georgia team this year, we know very little about them. I think that we know that they got a gutsy win on the road in a rivalry game for them, and that's impressive. But they certainly didn't look invulnerable in that game. They didn't look like they can't be stopped. They were stopped, and it was a coin flip away essentially from being a Tennessee win instead of a Georgia win. So it's there's reasons for both sides, I think, to feel like they can win this game.
Yeah, Gunnar Stockton making one of the throws of the year before the end of regulation in that game. And he seems to have gotten better with each game too. And I'm telling you, reps like that, games like that, environment, when you can win on the road in environments like that, that goes a long way.
For sure.
And they happen to be the team hosting Alabama this year. So Alabama's going to want to hope that they're on the other end of that. So Matt, we got more to cover when it comes to Alabama, Georgia, and we'll get there soon. But I want to shift to another topic and talk about the annual rivalries that Alabama has had throughout the years. And for our lifetime, for so long, we've seen them play Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU every single season. And obviously with SEC expansion, it changed the schedules up a little bit. And now we posted on our site, according to a report from Chris Lowe, friend of the podcast, Alabama will not be playing LSU annually under the SEC's new scheduling model. Instead, Alabama will have to play Mississippi State as one of its yearly opponents. And in Mississippi State, they will be on the schedule every season along with Auburn and Tennessee. So Alabama loses their annual game against LSU. And, we on our top 25 games from the last 25 years, we went one LSU game after another, seemingly. We talked about how incredible that rivalry was during the Saban era. That's obviously changed a little bit. The game's still really competitive, and there's still hate in the hearts of the fan bases when they play each other. But Matt, this is certainly bittersweet because it takes LSU, it pushes LSU a little further away. You don't have to like have that stress and anxiety going into that game and have to play a really tough team that has a lot of talent. But at the same time, Matt, like this is one that we all look forward to every year. It was always a slobber knocker. Are you going to miss this one?
Yeah, I think it's a huge bummer, and I understand why they did it the way they did it. I mean, we're talking about a situation where you have to pick 3 teams to have annual rivalries with going forward. Everybody else, you'll see basically every other year, I believe is how it's going to work. So, look, Alabama's going to still play LSU every other year instead of every year, but to me, if it was up to me, fairness would not be a concern in scheduling. And I totally understand why, but to me, there are more important things than competitive balance and the ability for a team to regularly compete for a national championship. I think college football is special because of rivalry games more so than any other individual element of this sport. They are so unique and special. And when you're in the stadium for one, your hairs stand up on your arms before kickoff. You see the teams line up across the line of scrimmage from each other for the first regular play in that game, and you almost can't believe you're seeing it. It is mythical almost feeling when you're at a great rivalry game. And I think sacrificing that, there's nothing you could get in return that can replace it or will be as good as that. So that's my own personal feeling about it. But on a logical, that's all emotion, right? On the logical side, if you put guys in a room and said we need to make the most fair and competitively balanced group of annual rivals for all 16 teams in the league, this is probably about as perfect as you could do it. My only real gripe looking at the whole league, I think Tennessee got off a little bit easy. Their 3 rivals are Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Alabama. And honestly, at the this year, that's pretty competitive. Actually, I would just say most. I don't expect Vanderbilt to continue to be doing what they're doing 10 years from now, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. I think ultimately, I think ultimately, if you say Alabama's got to play Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU every year, I think that's pretty brutal. And I don't think anybody else in the league, except maybe Auburn, would have to deal with something like that on a regular basis. And, look, I remember when this idea was first being discussed, there was some issues at Alabama internally. They did not think that that was fair. They did not think that that was even with everybody else to have those 3 rivals. And I think as special as Alabama LSU has been, I think we all probably can agree that the Iron Bowl and the third Saturday in October are historically more important rivalries. And you're looking at the bottom half of the league to try to even things out a little bit. Mississippi State makes perfect sense. Alabama's played Mississippi State more than any other school in the conference. They've played over 80 times, I believe. Um, they also are geographically the 2 closest schools to each other in the SEC. So it's are any of us ever going to feel like that's a real rivalry game? No, I don't think so. Uh, but I understand why they did it, and I think that it's tolerable, and I think that ultimately it could still produce some good games if Mississippi State does their part of it going forward. Um, and hopefully we'll just have to savor those Alabama LSU games in the years that we have them.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've played 108 times actually. And as you mentioned, I mean, Alabama's played Mississippi State more than any other SEC school. They're also the closest pair of SEC schools geographically, which makes this convenient annual rivalry for fans on both sides. There were, as AL.com's Matt Stahl reports in his story about this, I mean, the rivalry has not produced a lot of competition throughout the years. Mississippi State has won just 17 games in the series. Alabama's won 88. There have been 3 ties, so it's super lopsided. And I've been to some Mississippi State games throughout the years. Some of them competitive. Those Jackie Sherrill years, right, during like the late '90s. Competitive.
2017, it was a great game, by the way. That the year
Yep.
Alabama won a national championship, they had a fantastic, dramatic game in Starkville that season.
And when they were ranked number 1, I think, I forget which year it was exactly, 2014, I think,
I believe
when
it's
Dak
2014.
Prescott
Yeah.
was the quarterback. They came into Bryant-Denny Stadium, and Alabama beat up on them pretty good. The final score was closer than you would remember, maybe. But look, the LSU rivalry and the Auburn rivalry, for that matter, Tennessee, like those are the games like you're going to tell your grandkids about, right? Like I was there for the TJ Yeldon screen pass. I was there for the game of the century. I was there for the Cam Newton game and the kick six, for that matter, right? Like those are just on a different level. And while they were stressful and, like I said, gave fans a lot of anxiety and painful memories, that's rivalry. Those are rivalries. That's the whole point of it, and that's the point of college football. And even though Alabama had to play those 3 teams annually for so long, and during my entire lifetime, I think the last time they didn't play LSU was like before 1964 or something,
Yeah.
like certainly our entire lives. It's kind of stinks, but the fact that they get them every other year, I guess, is fine. I'll just say, like, that rivalry to me during the 2010s especially was just like as special as college football has ever been, as somebody who has watched it closely for my entire life. And so I think Alabama and LSU on the football field at the same time is just what college football is and should be. So, it's not like a death in the family here, and they're going to play them again, and they're going to play them a lot, relatively. But yeah, I hate to lose them as an annual opponent.
I'd honestly love to talk to some LSU fans about how they feel about this, because you look at the 3 that they got given. Uh, I know that LSU Ole Miss is a rivalry with some history to it. I know they care about that game. Their other 2 are Arkansas and Texas A&M. Now LSU is to me, man, that is an old school traditional SEC power, and they're having to play one of their rivalry games against a team that's only been in the league for 13 years or so. The other one's against Arkansas, who joined the league in 1992. I know they play for a trophy. Does anybody think about LSU Arkansas as a big important rivalry? I think LSU. Look, LSU doesn't get their annual rivalry with Florida anymore. They don't get to play Auburn every year anymore. And to me, that's another one from the 2000s and the 2010s. That was a great, fun rivalry to me in the SEC West, watching LSU and Auburn play every year. That game doesn't happen anymore on an annual basis. I would be pretty disappointed if I was an LSU fan with this draw. I just think you lose a lot of the heat on a regular basis. I think. Look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is fine with them because I'm not an LSU fan, but I would be disappointed if I were them. I think in this situation.
They're probably happy, Matt. Think of like how often Alabama, they're probably putting the extra crawfish into jambalaya today, Matt. It's just so offensive.
They got
but,
2 of their 3 permanent rivals have never been to the SEC championship game.
Well, look, the boot trophy is what Arkansas and LSU play for,
Yes,
right? Isn't
the
that
golden
their thing?
boot.
Yeah, I get, as an Alabama, like as somebody who's watched Alabama for so long, like I've always kind of like enjoyed the fact that there's not some like nickname or trophy in their rivalry games that they have. I guess there is a trophy between Alabama and Auburn, but
Technically,
I would bet if you polled 100,000 fans, they wouldn't know what the name of it.
LSU, Arkansas, LSU, Ole Miss are mid-card at best rivalries in the league. I don't have the wrestling analogies to pull out here, Ben. But
you're spot on.
It ain't The Rock versus Stone Cold by any means. Those 2, and LSU A&M is nothing. That's only a game because the 2 of them had that weird, whatever it was, 10 overtime game.
Yeah, Alabama LSU in those Saban years, the 2010 to the Les Miles years, even the Orgeron years, right? That's peak attitude era. You like if we're making the WWE
I was
analogy
setting you
here.
up for this. I
No,
knew
it's
you would.
perfect.
I knew you would do it.
No, mid card is perfect for those
Yeah.
rivalries. All right, well, it's a disappointment, but we'll look forward to some trips to Starkville, I guess, annually, Matt. Matt, it's time to go, but like I said earlier in the show, we learned that Bruce Pearl is retiring as Auburn's head basketball coach. Let me just get your quick thoughts on that and what it might mean for Alabama.
Well, it's a bigger issue than I would probably want to talk about on a sports podcast, I'll say, because
we'll get to that.
We're not going to stop hearing from Bruce Pearl, I think, anytime soon. But keeping it on sports, I think that this is a pretty monumental shift. I mean, as much as we often talk about how Nick Saban, I think, kind of was a guy that a tide that rose all the other boats in the SEC and in particular in the state. I think Bruce Pearl did that for basketball. I don't think Alabama took basketball nearly as seriously before Bruce Pearl arrived at Auburn. I think it forced Alabama to invest in the program and take it more seriously. And I think they've done that and it's paid off. And Alabama basketball is in as good a shape as it has been in my lifetime on a consistent basis right now. And I don't know that they bother if Bruce Pearl isn't making all that noise at Auburn. And look, the other part of this too, if you're Alabama, with all that said, and he did take their program to 2 Final Fours, Alabama had the upper hand on him. Nate Oates finishes with a winning record against Bruce Pearl during their careers together. And Bruce's final game at Auburn Arena is that buzzer beater by Mark Sears. Alabama sends them out on kind of a bitter note there. But look, I doubt the program is going to change that much fundamentally. Bruce Pearl is handing off the program to his son, who's been a part of things for a very long time. But Bruce is a big personality. You know, he drew a lot of attention to the program. He was a bit of a cult of personality at Auburn that I think excited people there in a way that very few coaches can do for any program. And I think it's a big loss for them. We'll see how things go moving forward, but you know, he was a very unique figure in sports in the state of Alabama, and I don't think that he will be easily forgotten or replaced.
No, I mean, look, it's good for Alabama in the sense that it becomes less competitive, and we'll see what his son does as the head coach, and if he can stay as competitive as Bruce Pearl. I don't know. I don't expect that, but it's bad for basketball in the sense that Alabama basketball, talking about the state, had its biggest year ever last year. I mean, Alabama under Nate Oates is having its best period maybe ever as a program. And then while they're trying to enjoy that, here's Bruce Pearl back in the Final Four, and they're better than Alabama. Yeah. Remember, there was 1-2 inside Coleman Coliseum last year. I never thought I would ever see that. Like, I didn't even entertain that idea until it happened.
And both of those games were tremendous last year. I mean, it brought attention to both programs in this state that they have really not had in the modern era of televised sports. And I mean, look, you gotta tip your hat to Bruce Pearl for being, look, he probably could have gone to a lot of places. I know he was not necessarily coming into Auburn with a spotless reputation, but I think a lot of places would like to have had him running their program for the past decade or so. And I think that the fact that he picked a place that has essentially no history of success at all, and he built it into something that people pay attention to and care about, it's a very impressive accomplishment.
What about all the memes, the Auburn memes? Are they all going to be disappointed about this?
Man, I hope so. I hope so. We get it, guys. You know how to use the photo filters on your
what
iPhone.
About the laser eye? What can they put laser eyes on now? Well, I mean, I think Alabama fans, the non-fogs, right? Like the non-football, I mean, like they're probably exhaling right now, and they're probably celebrating a little bit because this means that Nate Oates can just continue to enjoy, hopefully, a lopsided run in this rivalry. But we'll see what Bruce Jr. does in the role. Matt, I think that'll do it for us. More to come on the Bruce Pearl story, I'm sure. Whether we address it on this show or something else on AL.com remains to be seen. But thanks for doing this. Always appreciate it, and we'll talk more soon.
Yeah, good luck to your elections team.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. You can find Beat Everyone on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And we got much more to say about the Alabama-Georgia game coming up this week. So stick with us. We'll see you next time. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com.